For most of her life, Serena Williams was known as a symbol of strength. To the world, she looked unbreakable. On the tennis court, she dominated opponents with power, focus, and confidence that few athletes in history could match. Fans saw her lift trophies, survive pressure, and return from injuries again and again. Strength became her identity. It was not just something she had. It was something she lived by. From a very young age, Serena learned that showing weakness was not an option. Pain was something to push through, not talk about. Fear was something to silence, not examine. This mindset helped her become one of the greatest athletes of all time. But it also taught her to ignore warning signs that would later change her life. As the years passed, Serena's body began sending messages that could no longer be ignored. Migraines became a regular part of her life. At first, she treated them like simple headaches, something small compared to the pain she had already endured on the court. She continued training, competing, and winning, even when her body felt exhausted. Like many elite athletes, she believed rest meant falling behind. Slowing down felt dangerous. So she kept going. The public saw greatness. Behind the scenes, Serena was quietly managing discomfort that never truly went away. Eventually, time did what no opponent ever could. It slowed her down. Injuries took longer to heal. Recovery required more caution. When Serena finally stepped away from professional tennis, many people expected peace to follow. They imagined rest, family time, and happiness after a long career. But retirement brought something very different. Without the strict routine of training and competition, Serena was left alone with her thoughts, emotions, and physical struggles. The structure that had guided her since childhood was gone. And in that silence, everything she had once outrun began to surface. Serena later admitted that this period was one of the hardest of her life. Some days she did not feel okay. And saying those words was not easy for someone raised to believe that resilience meant staying quiet. Her honesty shocked many fans because they were used to seeing her as fearless and unstoppable. But for Serena, this admission marked an important change. For the first time, she was not fighting to win. She was learning how to accept limits. During this time, health conversations became more serious. Serena had already survived life-threatening medical events earlier in her career, including pulmonary embolisms. Those experiences permanently changed how doctors spoke to her. The focus was no longer on performance or fast returns. It was about safety, long-term health, and quality of life. Motherhood deepened this awareness. Becoming a mother made Serena more careful, more aware of her body, and more protective of her future. Strength alone was no longer enough. Responsibility had changed. Standing beside her through all of this was her husband, Alexis Ohanian. Known in the past for loud support and public praise, Alexis began to change as well. His role shifted quietly. He became more protective, more private, and more focused on what Serena needed rather than what the world expected. Public appearances became fewer. Their life became more guarded. This was not because love was fading, but because priorities were changing. This was the beginning of a different story. Not one about victory, but about reality. Not about domination, but about acceptance. Serena Williams, the woman who had spent her entire life being strong, was now facing something strength alone could not fix. And this moment would redefine not only her life, but the meaning of courage itself. Long before Serena Williams became a global sports icon, she was a child learning how to survive in a world that offered very little comfort. She was born on September 26, 1981, in Saginaw, Michigan, as the youngest of 5 sisters. From the beginning, life was not easy for the Williams family. Money was limited, stability was fragile, and every opportunity had to be earned through effort. When the family later moved to Compton, California, those challenges became even greater. The neighborhood was known for violence, fear, and constant pressure. For many children, this environment could have crushed dreams before they ever formed. For Serena, it became the foundation of who she would become. In the Williams household, tennis was never treated as a game. It was a plan. Richard Williams, Serena's father, believed that the sport could offer his daughters a way out of danger and hardship. He did not follow traditional paths. Without formal coaching experience, he created his own system. Every day had purpose. Every hour had meaning. From a very young age, Serena was taught that discipline mattered more than comfort. Complaints were discouraged. Emotional expression was seen as a distraction. Pain was not something to fear. It was something to accept. Serena was homeschooled so she could train more. This decision protected her from some outside dangers, but it also limited normal childhood experiences. While other children played freely, Serena practiced. Public tennis courts in Compton became her classroom. There, she faced more than just opponents. Crowds could be hostile. Insults were common. Racism was open and harsh. Instead of being shielded from this reality, Serena was taught to endure it. The message was clear. If she could survive this as a child, nothing in professional tennis would ever break her. This upbringing created extraordinary mental strength, but it also created silence. Serena learned early that showing emotion could be used against her. Tears were hidden. Fear was buried. Losses were not discussed in detail. They were absorbed and moved past. Winning was not just success. It was responsibility. Her family's future felt tied to her performance. That kind of pressure does not disappear. It follows a person into adulthood. When Serena turned professional at just 14 years old, she entered a world filled with older, stronger, and more experienced players. She did not protest the imbalance. She adapted. By 16, she was already making deep runs in tournaments. By 17, she had won her first Grand Slam title. The lesson seemed clear. Endurance brought results. Strength was rewarded. Stopping was never part of the equation, but this mindset came at a cost. Serena was never taught how to listen to her body. Warning signs were treated as challenges to overcome. Fatigue became normal. Emotional exhaustion was reframed as motivation. Over time, this approach helped build one of the greatest careers in sports history. But it also trained Serena to ignore herself as her career grew. So, did this habit? Injuries were minimized. Pain was hidden. The world saw confidence and power, even when her body was asking for rest. Years later, this conditioning would make health struggles harder to recognize and harder to accept. Migraines, exhaustion, and emotional strain were filtered through a lifetime of training that equated slowing down with failure. By the time Serena reached a point where her body could no longer be ignored, she had already spent decades convincing herself that stopping meant weakness. Letting go of that belief would become one of the most difficult challenges of her life. The child who was taught never to break had grown into a woman who now had to learn how to bend, rest, and finally listen. When Serena Williams met Alexis Ohanian, neither of them expected their lives to change in such a deep and lasting way. The meeting was simple and unplanned. They crossed paths in Rome at a hotel cafe, a quiet moment that did not feel important at the time. Serena was already one of the most famous athletes in the world. Alexis was a technology entrepreneur who knew little about tennis. Their worlds were different, and neither was searching for something serious. Yet that ordinary breakfast slowly became the start of a relationship built on curiosity, respect, and unexpected understanding. At the beginning, their relationship felt light and hopeful. Alexis followed Serena on tour, watching her matches from the stands and learning about her world from the outside. He did not try to control her life or compete with her success. Instead, he admired her strength and independence. For Serena, who had spent her entire life proving herself, this felt safe. She did not need to explain her ambition or defend her intensity. She could simply be herself. When Alexis proposed at the same hotel where they first met, the moment felt full of meaning. It symbolized balance and commitment. Their wedding was a celebration of love, stability, and a future that seemed clear and promising. To the public, they looked like a powerful couple with everything ahead of them. Success, family, and happiness all seemed perfectly aligned. But life rarely follows the plan people imagine. Pregnancy introduced fear into a space once filled with confidence. Serena achieved one of the most remarkable accomplishments in sports history by winning a Grand Slam while unknowingly pregnant. The world celebrated the victory. What followed was far more serious. After giving birth, Serena experienced severe breathing problems. She recognized the symptoms of a pulmonary embolism, a condition she had faced before. Doctors initially dismissed her concerns. Serena insisted on further tests. The scans confirmed multiple blood clots in her lungs. This moment changed everything. Alexis witnessed a side of Serena that few people had ever seen. Not the champion facing an opponent, but a woman fighting for her life. Complications continued. Her surgical wound reopened. Emergency procedures followed. Weeks of recovery replaced training and movement. The woman known for power and speed was forced into stillness. From that point on, Alexis's role in Serena's life changed. He became more than a partner in celebration. He became her advocate and protector. Medical conversations replaced travel plans. Caution replaced ambition. The language of their relationship shifted from dreams of the future to concerns about health and safety. This change was not dramatic or loud. It happened quietly. Day by day, as time passed and Serena stepped closer to retirement, these changes deepened. Migraines became more frequent. Emotional strain grew stronger, without the structure of competition. Alexis slowly stepped away from public attention. He spoke less, appeared less, and focused more on privacy. This was not distance between them. It was protection. He chose to guard their personal life rather than perform it for the world. Their love story did not end. It evolved. What once thrived on movement and shared momentum now relied on patience, understanding, and acceptance. When health discussions replaced career milestones, Alexis did not leave. But he began preparing emotionally for a future that looked very different from what they once imagined. This was not a goodbye to Serena. It was a goodbye to the version of life built on certainty and control. At the height of her career, Serena Williams appeared almost impossible to defeat. Her powerful serve, explosive movement, and fierce focus made her a dominant force on the tennis court. Opponents feared her presence before the match even began. To fans, she looked indestructible. But behind the trophies and records was a body carrying the heavy cost of years of extreme performance. Greatness, in Serena's case, demanded constant sacrifice. From the early years of her professional career, Serena dealt with physical pain that rarely made headlines. Knee injuries limited her movement. Back pain followed. Shoulder problems appeared at different stages. Each injury required rehabilitation, but the expectations around her never slowed. The tennis world expected Serena to return quickly and dominate again. And most of the time, she did. This created a powerful illusion. It seemed as if she could outwork injury itself. What made Serena different was not that she avoided pain. It was that she refused to surrender momentum. She returned to competition again and again, often before her body was fully ready. Every comeback strengthened the belief that discipline and determination could overcome anything. But the human body keeps its own record. Years of pushing through discomfort slowly added up. One of the most emotionally intense moments of her career came during the 2009 U.S. Open. The controversy that followed placed Serena under extreme public scrutiny. The pressure was not only emotional. It affected her physically as well. Stress, criticism, and expectation pushed her nervous system to its limits. In the years that followed, she experienced deep fatigue, inflammation, and pain that no amount of training could completely erase. Despite this, Serena continued winning. She collected Grand Slam titles well into her 30s, breaking historical expectations in women's tennis. Each victory reinforced the myth that she was untouchable. But beneath the success, warning signs were growing louder. Then came one of the most serious moments of her life. Serena suffered a pulmonary embolism, a blood clot in her lungs that forced an abrupt stop to her career. Doctors warned her that returning to elite competition carried real risk. For the first time, tennis was no longer just about winning. It was about survival. Even after returning to the sport, fear followed her. Every pain felt different. Every headache carried memory. She became more aware of her body, not as a weapon, but as something fragile. Her historic Australian Open victory, while pregnant, was celebrated around the world. It was called one of the greatest achievements in sports history. But it also hid how vulnerable her physical state had become. Pregnancy, childbirth, and recovery placed additional strain on a body that had already endured years of punishment. Complications during childbirth reminded Serena that strength could not protect her from everything. Later, when doctors identified a branchial cyst in her neck, it became another reminder that her body was changing. Cooperation was no longer guaranteed. When Serena finally stepped away from professional tennis, many believed her body would finally find relief. Instead, symptoms that were once drowned out by competition became louder. Migraines intensified. Emotional exhaustion surfaced. Without the distraction of training and matches, Serena was forced to face the long-term effects of a career built on endurance. This chapter of her life was no longer about titles or records. It was about limits. It was about listening to a body that had given everything. For someone who had spent her entire life fighting through pain, learning when to stop became the hardest lesson of all. When Serena Williams officially stepped away from professional tennis, she described the moment not as an ending, but as an evolution. To the public, her words sounded hopeful and calm. Fans were proud. Commentators spoke about legacy and impact. But privately, the transition was far more complex. For the first time since childhood, Serena no longer had a life structured around training, competition, and survival. The routine that had guided her through pain and pressure was suddenly gone. In its place came silence. That silence was not peaceful at first. It forced Serena to sit with emotions she had spent decades avoiding. Without the noise of crowds and the urgency of matches, there was no distraction. Physical discomfort felt stronger. Emotional weight felt heavier. Migraines, fatigue, and anxiety no longer had competition to hide behind. Each day required a different kind of strength, one that did not involve winning. During this period, Serena began speaking more openly about her mental health. In a rare and honest admission, she shared that she was not always okay. For a woman long portrayed as unbreakable, those words carried deep meaning. They were not dramatic. They were real. She acknowledged exhaustion, uncertainty, and the difficulty of redefining herself outside of sport. This honesty marked a turning point. For the first time, Serena allowed the world to see her without armor. Motherhood offered grounding and purpose, but it also brought new fears. Serena became more aware of her physical limits. Past medical trauma made her cautious. Every symptom carried concern. Health conversations with doctors were no longer focused on recovery timelines or returns to form. They were about management, prevention, and long-term quality of life. The language of competition was replaced by the language of care. Alexis Ohanian remained by her side through this transition, but his presence changed in quiet ways. In the past, he spoke publicly about ambition, building, and chasing big dreams. Now, his focus shifted. He spoke more about family, protection, and emotional presence. Public appearances became less frequent. Interviews became more guarded. The loud declarations of love were replaced by steady, consistent support. This was not distance. It was devotion shaped by reality. This is where the idea of goodbye truly emerges. Not as abandonment, but as acceptance. Alexis was not saying goodbye to Serena. He was saying goodbye to a version of life they once believed in. A life built on certainty, control, and the belief that strength could solve everything. He accepted that some things could not be fixed or forced. They could only be managed with care. Serena, too, was saying goodbye. Goodbye to competition as identity. Goodbye to invincibility as protection. Goodbye to the belief that enduring in silence was the only way forward. The health challenges she faced forced her to confront limits she could no longer ignore. For the first time, she allowed herself to stop. This chapter of Serena Williams' life does not end with defeat. It ends with truth. She spent years fighting opponents across the net. This time, there is no opponent. There is only acceptance, adjustment, and learning how to live without constant battle. In choosing to step away, Serena did not lose her strength. She redefined it. Her story reminds us that courage is not always loud. Sometimes it is the quiet decision to listen, to rest, and to let go. And in that silence, Serena Williams continues to inspire, not as a champion chasing victory, but as a human choosing health, family, and peace. For most of her life, Serena Williams lived under constant observation. From the moment she stepped onto professional courts as a teenager, the world watched her closely. Every win was celebrated. Every loss was questioned. Every emotion was examined. Unlike many athletes, Serena was not only judged for her performance, but for her appearance, her confidence, and the space she took up. The pressure did not come only from competition. It came from expectations that followed her everywhere. Media attention often framed Serena as larger than life. She was called powerful, dominant, intimidating. While these words praised her success, they also removed her humanity. There was little room in that image for vulnerability or rest. When Serena showed emotion, it was criticized. When she remained silent, it was misunderstood. Over time, she learned that the world preferred her strong and silent rather than honest and human. This constant pressure shaped how Serena dealt with pain. Admitting struggle felt dangerous. Weakness could be turned into headlines. Health issues became private battles because public discussion often led to judgment instead of understanding. When injuries forced her out of tournaments, questions followed immediately. Was she finished? Was she losing her edge? These questions ignored the reality of a body under stress. They reduced complex health struggles into simple narratives of decline. As Serena grew older, the pressure increased rather than eased. She was no longer just competing against opponents. She was competing against time, history, and public memory. Every comeback was treated as a test. Every pause was treated as a failure. This environment made it harder to listen to her body. Slowing down felt like letting people down. After retirement, the spotlight did not disappear. It simply changed shape. Instead of asking about matches and rankings, people asked about her next move. Business, fashion, legacy. The expectation remained the same. Serena was expected to keep moving, keep building, keep proving. Rest was rarely part of the conversation. Health struggles, when mentioned, were often misunderstood. Many people assumed that stepping away from tennis meant healing would be easy. They did not see the long-term effects of years of physical stress, medical trauma, and emotional exhaustion. Recovery is not always fast. Sometimes it is not complete. Serena's honesty about not being okay challenged the image the world had built of her. And not everyone was ready to accept that. For Alexis Ohanian, watching this pressure from the outside changed his priorities. He saw how public attention could drain rather than support. He understood that protecting Serena sometimes meant stepping back from visibility. Privacy became a form of care. Silence became a shield. This decision was not about hiding. It was about preserving what mattered. As a couple, they learned that not every chapter needs to be shared. Not every struggle needs an audience. This was a new way of living for Serena, who had grown up in front of cameras. Learning to exist without constant explanation was difficult, but necessary. This phase of life forced Serena to redefine success. It was no longer measured by trophies or applause. It was measured by stability, health, and peace. Some days were easier than others. Progress was not always visible. But for the first time, Serena was not chasing approval. She was choosing herself. Living under constant observation teaches a person how to perform strength. Stepping away teaches them how to feel it. Serena Williams spent decades proving she could survive anything the world placed in front of her. Now, her challenge was different. It was learning how to live without fighting the world at every turn. This chapter does not erase her past. It deepens it. It shows that even legends need rest. Even icons need protection. And even the strongest people deserve a life where they are not always being watched. When people talk about Serena Williams, they often begin with numbers. Grand Slam titles. Weeks at number 1. Records broken and barriers crossed. These achievements are important, and they will always be part of her story. But as Serena moved into this new phase of life, it became clear that her legacy could not be measured by statistics alone. The meaning of her journey was changing, and so was the message she left behind. For many years, Serena represented power and dominance in a way the sports world was not used to seeing, especially from a woman, and especially from a Black woman. She challenged expectations simply by existing on her own terms. She did not make herself smaller to be accepted. She did not soften her ambition to be liked. This strength inspired millions, but it also came with a heavy cost. Carrying that role meant rarely showing doubt, pain, or fear. The world wanted a symbol, not a person. As Serena stepped away from competition, she began to reshape what strength could look like. She spoke openly about exhaustion. She admitted uncertainty. She allowed herself to be seen as someone still learning. This honesty mattered deeply, especially to people who had grown up watching her. It showed that success does not protect anyone from struggle. It showed that even legends must face limits. The idea of legacy began to move away from winning and toward impact. Serena's influence could now be felt in quieter ways. In conversations about mental health, in discussions about maternal care and medical bias, in the courage to say, "I need to stop" in a world that constantly demands more. These choices did not weaken her legacy. They expanded it. Alexis Ohanian's role in this chapter also reflected this shift. He no longer spoke about Serena as a champion to be celebrated, but as a person to be protected. His support became less visible, but more meaningful. The goodbye he was preparing for was not dramatic or final. It was the acceptance that their future would not look like the one they once imagined. That some dreams would change shape. That strength would be expressed through care rather than conquest. For Serena, redefining legacy meant letting go of the need to prove herself. It meant trusting that her value did not depend on performance. This was not easy. When a person spends their entire life being rewarded for endurance, rest can feel like failure. But Serena's journey shows that growth often requires discomfort. Letting go is its own kind of courage. Her story now speaks to a broader truth. Many people are taught to push through pain, ignore warning signs, and keep going at all costs. Serena's life shows where that path can lead, but it also shows another way forward. A way that includes listening, adjusting, and choosing health over expectation. This is why the idea of goodbye matters. It is not about loss. It is about transition. Serena Williams did not disappear when she stepped away from tennis.
She evolved.
She carried everything she learned into a new form of strength. One that does not rely on applause or dominance. In this sense, her legacy is still being written. Not on scoreboards, but in lives she continues to influence. In people who see themselves reflected in her honesty. In those who feel permission to slow down because she did. Serena Williams spent years showing the world how to fight. Now she is showing it how to live. And that lesson may be her most powerful one yet.